Hello and welcome back to I Made This. My name is Ollie and today we're going to be revisiting a project that I started on this channel 3 years ago. Now I wasn't intending for it to take 3 years, but I think I've made about 8 music videos, 3 restorations, 2 big bot bashes and a partridge in a pear tree since making that original video. So it's taken some time, but I have been working on it on and off since then. And so I think now is time to kind of get back to the T-Bone McLASERBLAST action figure. So who is T-Bone McLASERBLAST, you may ask? Well, he's a character that I created that is a kind of a mix between Brock Sampson and Dog the Bounty Hunter. So you put those two together and you kind of get the gist of who this guy is. He's kind of like a intergalactic badass, but me being me and my sensibilities, he's a bit of a schlub and a bit of a loser at the same time. So yeah, he's not the coolest guy in the universe, but he thinks he is. And in these series of music videos, he fights Alice in Wonderland, yes, Alice in Wonderland, who has become like a benevolent god-type being in this land called Sweetsville and rules it with an iron fist, and it's become all Mad Max there and things like that. And T-Bone is hired to help liberate the people there, basically. And whenever I create a character, it's always through the lens of, this will make a cool toy. I want to see this on my toy shelf. So with that in mind, I thought the first action figure I should ever make should be of T-Bone McLASERBLAST. Now in the past, I have sculpted and molded and casted my own kind of like staction kind of figures before, but obviously they don't move. And they were like of characters like the Ninja Turtles and things like that. IPs that I don't own. And I did dabble in making my first articulated figure, kind of like in the Kenner 5 points of articulation kind of vein, but I didn't really go very far with it because those kind of Kenner figures, while they're cool, they're not my favourite kind of figures. My favourite figures growing up were like those Playmates action figures like the Ninja Turtles or Toxic Crusaders that were bright and colourful and had crazy sculpts. And taking that in mind, that's where I wanted to go with this action figure. And I mean, that's how he was designed originally. He was a bright blue alien with a turquoise pompadour, quiff and mullet and a giant handlebar. So he's not very subtle. You kind of go big or go home with a character like this. And in that video, I went through all the different materials that I was going to be using to make this figure, from the super sculpey to the resins, the silicone and the pigments. I also talked about how I was going to do the articulation for the figure by using the articulation from old Master of the Universe figures. And in this video, you see me creating this figure from scratch, from the initial sketch all the way through to a fully rendered drawing on the computer where I worked out all the different points of articulation that I wanted to use. I then printed out that said picture to use as a size guide, and then from that I created an armature which I bulked out with tin foil and then refined with Super Sculpey, where I built up all the detail, be it on the torso, the head, the legs, the hands, the arms, his weapon, even his little companion buddy. And once I've made all these parts, I roughly put them together before I glued on all the articulation points, just so I could get a sense of how the figure would look when it was finally finished. And even though he looks pretty cool in this state right now, there's still a hell of a lot more work to go. So with that said, let's go make an action figure. So before I get into finessing the rest of the body, I decided I want to make T-Bone some new legs. For the past 6 months I was staring at this unfinished toy and looking at his leg, and I just started to hate them. They just look so silly. I mean, I know T-Bone's a silly looking character anyway, but these legs were just so out of proportion. I mean, I like characters with bigger upper torsos and smaller legs, but this was just taking the Michael a little bit. But because I decided he had to be around the 4.5, 5 inch scale, I was sacrificing the overall quality of the product at the end of the day. Much like Lieutenant Dan, T-Bone needed some new legs. And I'm really glad that I did this because it just looks so much better. And here are the final legs, which I finessed with a little bit more milliput just to kind of add a bit more detail. One thing I came to learn while making this action figure is that I was constantly having to refine the character all the time, be it with milliput, sanding and spraying, just constantly on repeat until I got the parts to the point where I was happy with them. I mean, look at those legs, they look so silly compared to the new ones. And here you can see how I've used Milliput to refine some of these body parts, and actually did some dry carving just to kind of bring out some more of the detail that may have been lost with the priming. And then I give them one final prime before I start the tedious process of creating the moulds. So this is probably my least favourite part of making an action figure. Creating moulds is just so tedious and boring, especially when you're having to create two-part moulds, because it takes twice as long. And you have to create a box essentially, which I'm creating here out of Lego, and then filling it with plasticine, which you then cover up at least half of the part or item that you want to mould. And it doesn't have to be totally neat, just so long as you get clean edges around the actual figure itself. But it can be a bit bumpy and lumpy. In fact, that's probably better, because then it means the actual two-part mould will actually lock together better. And I've actually just punctured in some holes here so that once the negative is created, it will lock even tighter together. You'll see in a bit. And then these cocktail sticks are just for air vents, so that when I'm pouring the resin in, there'll be places for air to escape, so that hopefully I won't get so many air bubbles. And then using more Lego, I build the box up around the part. So now it's time to get the silicone ready, and the silicone that I have comes with a setting agent that is a 1:10 ratio, so whatever weight you put into the cup, you put 10% of the setting agent into it. I think the more setting agent you put into it, basically the faster it cures, but you don't have as much time to work with it because it'll start to set on you very quickly. And then I just start to pour it in the moulds. Now I have since bought a vacuum chamber since making these moulds, and I would probably use that just to make sure that the silicone was degassed, because when you're stirring up silicone you're putting air into it, and by doing that you get an even better mould at the end of the day. But here I'm just taking off the plasticine from the mould, but as you can see it's left some residue. So using some acetone free, I probably should have used one with acetone in it, but it's all I had at the time. Acetone free nail polish remover. I just cleaned up the moulds and took out the actual body part and cleaned that up as well, because when I'm making the second part of the mould, I don't want any plasticine residue on there to kind of mess up the shape of the original sculpt. And then I build up Lego around it and put the cocktail sticks and that back in. And then with a wax spray, you spray that onto the mould, and basically that creates a very thin layer of wax onto your mould and your item. And it just means that when you pour the silicone over the top of that to create the two-part mould, that the two parts of the silicone don't bond together, because that's what they will do. But because you've got that very thin layer of wax on there, it will mean that you can prise the two parts apart. And here you go. They're starting to come apart. And then we have the two halves of the mould, and they look pretty good. And then I repeat the exact same process for all the other parts: the torso, the head, the arms, the hands, the gun. Like I said, it's a very tedious process. It probably takes around 2 days to make these moulds, and that's because you have to wait 12 to 24 hours for the silicone sets before you can then flip it around and do the other side of the mould, basically, which is then another 12 to 24 hours. If you're running low on silicone, you can actually chop up your old moulds into chunks and put that into the mould itself as well, because the silicone will adhere to those chunks and form a whole, basically. And yeah, it just saves you some money on silicone because it's gotten rather pricey. And yeah, here they all are. They're all looking pretty good. I'm pretty pleased with how these have all turned out. But then again, I haven't cast them yet, so that might be awful. I do, however, like doing these moulds. One-part moulds are so easy. I'm just creating a simple box out of foam board that I glue together with hot glue, and then I glue the items inside the box and just pour the silicone over the top and wait for it to cure, and then Bob's your uncle, you've got your mould straight away. And all being well, these parts should cast really well because there's no odd shapes or awkward angles for air bubbles to rear their ugly head into it. So hopefully these ones should turn out pretty well. So just for fun, seeing as I've made the moulds, I thought it'd be fun to put them all together and finally see what this toy will hopefully look like when it's all casted. And I'm thrilled to bits with how he looks, to be honest. It's come together much better than I thought. I mean, not a lot of movement from the head, but that was to be expected. But yeah, I'm super thrilled with how he's looking so far. And here he is, just under some cool lighting, because, you know, why not? And as you can see, I couldn't be bothered to give him another prime after refining his shoulder and the back of his head there, because, I don't know, I was getting a bit fed up with priming him, to be honest. But yeah, T-Bone is finally coming alive. So now it's time to cast T-Bone and see if all of our hard work of sculpting and creating the moulds is going to pay off. And as you can see, I'm just preparing the moulds with a bit of strong backing and elastic bands. And first of all, I'm going to cast the little buddy, his little companion. And I've got a nice bright translucent neon orange that I'm going to pour into some PX90 resin, which is a 2-part mix, 50-50. And as for the main body, really, ideally, I'd like him to be a solid blue colour, but I don't have any solid resins or any epoxy resins on me at the moment. I only have the translucent ones at the moment, so I just opted to do him a translucent turquoise because, I don't know, it's better than nothing. I'm probably going to fully paint this character anyway, at least for this initial cast anyway. And I'm just injecting that resin in using a syringe and hoping that it all turns out well, and thankfully it looks like it's turning out pretty well. I'm getting a few air bubbles here and there, but again, that's something that can be ironed out when I finally get a pressure pot eventually, which, as it's the future now, I actually have one now. But at the time of casting these, I didn't have one. But as you can see, just a little bit of flashing there, nothing major. So yeah, I think it's going to look pretty good when it's all put together. As you can see, a bit of air bubbles at the bottom of that arm there. But yeah, it all fits together pretty well. And just doing a little bit of a wiggle test now to make sure that none of the body parts fall off, and so far so good. So now it's time to use a bit of milliput to fill in all those air pockets. I mean, this isn't ideal. If I'm to mass produce this figure, I don't want to have any air pockets whatsoever, and hopefully a pressure pot will alleviate that. But for now, I'm going to try and fill it with a bit of milliput, and hopefully it should work because milliput tends to stick to anything. But as this is a more gummy resin, the PX90, I have no idea if the hard milliput will actually adhere to it, so fingers crossed. So now it's time to paint T-Bone blue, because obviously I used a clear translucent resin, but the only paint I had available to me in this colour was a matte emulsion. And yeah, you don't want to be painting your figures with that kind of paint, but for a prototype it's alright. And it turned out pretty decent, to be honest. I mean, you wouldn't want to play with it, it would all scuff off, but if you're just putting it on your shelf for display, it works fine. It's really satisfying painting in all these details though, making the character come alive. It's very satisfying, it all comes together. I mean, if I was to mass produce this figure, obviously his body would be cast in a blue resin, and it would just be a case of painting in his waistcoat and the skull. Yeah, I love painting these trousers or paints, and like I said before, just bringing all those sculpted details to life is very satisfying. And even though he's got a very simple colour scheme, it's very bold and cartoon-like, it seems to work. And yeah, a lot of those toys that I had growing up had very minimal paint apps anyway, a very simple paint job. And using minimal colours for someone like me who's not like a great painter or anything like that just seems to work a treat. And this arm, if it was the 80s or 90s, would probably be VAT metalized, and that would look pretty rad, to be honest. And I'm just painting his face blue, and as if by magic, ta-da! His face is finished. And then just painting his hands. To be honest, this is the area where the matte emulsion will probably get scuffed the most, because a gun's going to go in his hand, and that's where he's going to encounter a lot of rub from the gun being put in and out of his hand. So that's the only cause of concern I have, really. And then I just wanted to kind of dirty up that robotic arm a little bit. And even though a toy from the 80s and 90s wouldn't be textured or weathered to this degree, I just thought, for the sake of my own action figure, I think it just kind of gives it that little extra oomph. And also, as you can see there, I actually added a bit of detail with a wire, because I love putting wires on my figures and models. And then just brushing a bit of silver onto the gun there, and now I'm just painting the eyes of his little companion. I probably should have done a white underneath that and then painted the yellow, but oh well. And there he is, the first prototype of a fully painted, articulated T-Bone McLASERBLAST. And here he is under some cool lighting. So, as this is my very first cast of this T-Bone McLASERBLAST, and what you're looking at now is a 2-year-old toy at this point, because I used more gummy resin, the PX90, he's very heavy at top, which means that it's put a lot of pressure on his legs, and he's kind of leaning forward a bit, so he has a tendency to fall over. But that's something I'm going to address in the next version. So if you remember, a couple of years ago, my good friend Theo Kane from Slimehouse TV came over to my office just to document the stuff that I make and that. And we kind of had a good discussion about my T-Bone figure, about how I could cast him and make him better in the future, how I could probably use a harder resin for his legs, and the kind of blue pigments that I could use for his body. So taking all that in mind, I decided to cast a bunch more T-Bone McLASERBLASTs. But as you can see, I'm still getting air bubbles, because at this point I still haven't got a pressure pot. And as you can see, there's the gummy legs, but now I cast some more out of a harder resin. So hopefully the harder resin legs will kind of take the brunt of the weight from the upper torso area, and hopefully it won't buckle under its own weight. Hopefully, anyway, that's the plan. And just refining it, sanding it down to making sure that he stands up. And now I'm just cutting off the flashing. Now, once this resin is fully cured, it's a bit of a bugger to kind of cut and sand, because it's not like a harder resin which you can easily sand and trim. This PX90 is a bit more of a pain in the bum to work with, to be honest, and yeah, I'm not a fan of it. But in terms of making a toy, it looks a lot better and feels a lot more like an action figure than harder resin. And because I've been futzing around with my moulds a little bit more, I'm actually starting to get some better casts of my body parts. As you can see, the air holes on this head are a lot less egregious than the very first one that I did. And you'll find that with your moulds, that every mould has a little kink in it, and it takes you a few goes to kind of figure out exactly how the best way to cast your parts are, because they're all unique and individual and different. And again, I still haven't got a pressure pot at this time, so I'm just getting out that milliput to fill in any of those air holes that I've got in the figure. As you can see, I've filled in the holes in that arm. It's not perfect, but it'll do. I've filled in a few holes in the legs as well. And much like Tobias in Arrested Development, T-Bone blew himself, so it means I don't have to paint his body anymore, just his waistcoat and his skull on his back. And again, painting them pants. and the gun. Shall I or shan't I make them kiss? And here we go, here's a much more refined T-bone. You probably really can't tell that much of a difference from the earlier version, but as he's got a proper, perfectly blue resin torso and arm and hands and head, he just feels even that little bit more toyetic. And as you can see, I've given him some dog tags that he had in the Tally Ho music video, and I've put some stickers on the gun because I love those old Toxic Crusaders toys, and like the No Zone gun has a bunch of stickers on them, Toxie Shield has stickers on it, so I thought just a few stickers on the gun will kind of really bring it to life and make it look even more toyetic. And here he is next to some other figures. As you can see, I originally wanted him to be the scale of a Ninja Turtle figure, but kind of towers over those. And he's more in line with, say, the Earthworm Jim figures or the Master of the Universe figures, but he's still much more wider and much more bulky. Probably more like a Street Shark maybe, but don't own any of those. And you can't really tell, but sometimes your molds have a tendency to shrink a little bit, so this T-bone is slightly smaller than the original version. And as you can see, all of his articulation works perfectly. I can't explain to you how happy I am with this figure. It's probably one of my favourite things I've ever made, and I just think it's such an achievement. And I don't like to boast, and if you've ever watched any of my other videos, you know that I'm pretty hard on myself. For me to say I'm really pleased and proud of something I've made is quite a big thing for me, but I'm really pleased and proud of T-Bone McLASERBLAST. Yeah, he's a bit big. I definitely wanted to be a bit smaller in the future if I was to make another one, but I think he looks pretty good. So after a long, grueling casting and painting session, I had made 4 figures in total. While I was doing that, I thought it'd be really fun to cast up some of the fridge magnets and little blobby guys that I made in really fun, exciting colours, and just kind of really play around with the resin like I never have before. I mean, look at that glow-in-the-dark one. And so I took them all to the NEC Toy Fair and just gave them out to some of my friends. So here's Dave, aka Vintage Toy Rush, with the fridge magnet and one of his little figures that I gave him. And for Theo, I actually gifted him one of my T-Bone figures just to say thank you. Thank you for all the support you've given me over the last couple of years. Likewise to Dan, my good friend Mr. Dan Plastic. You know, he's been a massive supporter of I Made This, and so it's a little something just to say thanks. And again, Bill Making Stuff, he was kind enough to ask me to be part of the Big Bot Bash, and again, it's just my way of saying thanks. And look, he even made it into one of his episodes. So yeah, as I said, I am super thrilled with how this has turned out. He looks better than I could have possibly imagined when I first started this project all those years ago. But it's not the end of the T-Bone McLASERBLAST saga. There'll be one more video to come, and that's where I'm going to be making his blister card and bubble. So he looks like an action figure that you would have seen on the shelves in Woolworths or Argos when you were a kid all those years ago. And then finally we can put it to bed. But it won't be the end of my toy making journey on this channel, because I've got so many more ideas for action figures of my own characters or characters from movies or the music world that have never been immortalised in action figure form before. So just watch this space. And if you've reached this part of the video, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I hope you've enjoyed the T-Bone McLASERBLAST build so far. And while I have you here, if I can just get a few more moments of your time, because I'm excited to announce that I've just launched a Patreon. And if you're interested in helping support my future claymation films or action figure builds in the future, then please head over to Patreon and check out all the different tiers I've got there, ranging from £3 to £8, that grant you anything from early access to videos, behind the scenes looks of whatever I'm working on at the time, your name, the credits of my videos, all the way through to one-of-a-kind action figures that you can only get through being a member of the Patreon. And the reason why I'm doing this, it's simple. It's because the things that I'm making now are getting bigger and bigger and hopefully better and better. But on the flip side, they're also getting a lot harder to make and taking up a lot more of my time. So any support I get from you is, I can't even express how massively appreciated it would be. and any penny that I make from the Patreon will go directly back into the channel in making the videos even better than they already are. If Patreon is not your thing, that's totally cool and I get it. There are still ways to support me if you wish to do so, be it just liking the video that you're watching right now. You can subscribe to the channel if you don't do so already. You can hit the bell icon so you're notified whenever I drop a new video. Or you can share my videos on social media, platform of your choice, whichever. Like I said, any help given does not go unnoticed and it's massively, massively appreciated. But yeah, I think that about wraps it up for today. Don't forget you can reach out to me on social media. I'm on Instagram and Facebook, just search for I Made This. And until next time, take care and goodbye.